I'm one with the Force is with me.
I'm one with the Force. The Force is with me. And I'm one with the Force.
Welcome to the Dharma of the Force, a podcast about the spiritual and philosophical side of Star Wars. If that puts you off, it's just words. And if you think that's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo, even better. We cannot widen our horizon and grow by never challenging what we believe, and we should always be suspicious of those who tell us what to believe. In some Buddhist traditions, listening to Dharma talks is a spiritual practice. It's not meant to give answers per se. It's an exercise in looking at questions and elaborating on them, and finding the truth within yourself. So in that spirit, let us look at today's topic. An introduction. Hello. Why am I doing this? No one is going to sign up to hear about me. Well, I still thought it's best to explain my background and credentials so I don't have to do it in the future. This is more to be revisited by everyone stumbling across my podcast, wondering why I feel the need to talk about these topics, rather than doing latest news and rumors, or reaction, or recaps, or whatever. I don't find it to be interesting. Let me rephrase that. I don't think I have something particularly interesting to add to that. There are some great and interesting podcasts out there, but it's not what I want to do. So why did I decide to start yet another podcast? It's easy. I don't find a lot of people in the fandom, if you want to call it that, are talking about it. At least not publicly. At least not to my knowledge. But even I am known to make mistakes from time to time. Anyway, I've always been more interested in the historic and spiritual aspect of Star Wars. In school, I took Latin and ancient Greek classes and wanted to study archaeology. Yes, I also like Indiana Jones. But something got in the way.
Rock and roll.
I'm not gonna plug my musical career here like, hey dude, check out my band. But let's just say I released around 10 albums with 2 different bands. If you ask me, I might tell you about it. But let's say I dislike this kind of desperate self-cross promotion. Touring the world, I got bitten by the travel bug, or let's say
There's been an awakening.
I drove around a lot as a kid, accompanying my father, who worked as a location scout amongst other things back then, and I spent some time on sets early on. It was just for TV ads, but hey, I could be one of those I worked in the industry, I know how it is guys on YouTube. Apart from a short Masters of the Universe phase, or more like divided attention phase, I've always been a massive Star Wars and only Star Wars fan. Okay, I also like the Next Generation, but that's
A good question for another time.
And the concept of the Force fascinated me. So around 15 years ago or so, I really got into, let's say, Eastern philosophy, mostly Japanese martial arts and Zen Buddhism. I practiced Kendo, that's Japanese swordsmanship evolved out of the samurai training, for those who don't know, for a while, and even participated in some international tournaments, but unfortunately I'm not a born athlete, and some minor injuries added up, and it's a full contact sport after all, and on the tournaments and competition didn't really bring out the best in me. I still remember the first lesson when the sensei said, "This is not Star Wars." The training certainly gave me a critical eye for fight choreography and efficient movement. I've kind of been more interested in the etiquette and meditation part of it anyway, so I focused on that from now on. I'm an avid meditator, and I like to analyze feelings and motivations, not only my own, I'm afraid, so I'm almost as annoying as someone who studies psychotherapy.
Oh dear.
I'm not gonna rant about how the music industry changed, well, maybe a little, but let's say I needed something else to fall back on. For a period of time, I was a small cogwheel in the machinery of the likes of David Hasselhoff, Lady Gaga, or Whitney Houston at one of her last shows. After that, I focused more on my communication background, and I worked as a trainer and coach. I'm fascinated by the psychology of communication and the subconscious cues and triggers that make us tick and react to things in a certain way. There's this corny saying, if you point a finger at someone else, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I'm always fascinated how willingly people on the internet are giving an insight into their mindset. And you know how they say, travel broadens the mind. It's all about the experience and how much you let it soak in. So like many other fans, I've obviously visited countless filming locations to experience Star Wars firsthand, kind of. Ultimately, it's us who project meaning or spirituality on places. The rocks in Stonehenge don't care about being Stonehenge. The pyramids in Giza don't claim to be the
Best and coolest pyramid suck it Teotihuacan.
It is the human capacity for awe and wonder that gives them power. So I like to go there and experience this power, even if it's a placebo. It makes you feel as if you can sense the force. And who knows, some places might have some sort of natural power. Believing makes it real. Same goes for all kinds of spiritual teachings, or however you want to put it. There's a lot of negativity and suspicion attached to these, let's call them esoteric things, and rightfully so. The difference between an enlightened guru and a charlatan is often only your point of view and how much you're willing to open up to it. Quick side note, if money is involved, it's usually a con man and not a holy person. But to quote yet another Buddhist saying, there are many ferries that take you to the other side of the river. Ferries being belief system or religions, the other side being spiritual insight or enlightenment. Just don't hold on to them once you reach the other side and claim they're better or superior. It doesn't matter anymore. It is on you if you want to believe whether or not there is another side of the river or if ferries even exist. But I do ask you to be open-minded and search for the force in everything. The force is universal. The Japanese call it ki, the Chinese call it ji, and the Indian yogi call it prana. Does that word sound familiar? On a related subject, did you know that Emperor Asoka the Great was a conqueror until he converted, laid down his weapons, and became instrumental in the spread of Buddhism in India? A Zen master once got asked by someone, "Tell me about Zen." And the story goes something like this. Instead of answering, he started to pour a cup of tea until it spilled over. The man said, "Stop it, it's already full. Can't you see there's no more room for tea?" So the Zen master answered, "You are like this cup, so full that nothing more can be added. Come back when your cup is empty." And so many times we only hear what we want to hear. We see what we want to see, and we have already made up our minds before and just seek something to justify our opinions. That's how the human mind works. It's tough to get out of the comfort zone and find your own way. You know, the alternative?
Better, busier, more seductive.
Fake reviews and internet outrage can speak to that. We're easily tricked. Our minds are constantly like the rough sea, so murky you can't see. We need to be still and find a balance in ourselves, and the water will calm down, the dust will settle, and we will be able to see clearly. But don't believe me. Trust no one who claims to have found the truth. The philosophers in ancient Greek didn't claim to be wise. They literally called themselves friends of wisdom. I'm just a seeker of answers, musing about possible explanations and narcissistically adding my voice to the mix. So if you are a fellow seeker of the force, this podcast is for you. You are the chosen ones.
So the prophecy says.
If you want to support me or this podcast, don't send money. I don't have a Patreon. Find a charity of your choosing and donate. And do yourself a favor and switch off your phone, disconnect, and just sit in silence for a few minutes. Close your eyes and
Breathe. Just breathe.